talking about India-China relations. Now, let me first tell you the breakup, how we'll go about discussing it. We'll first talk about the historical events that have happened. This is going to be your homework. This is going to be your fact sheet work. And I hope you are catching up with your homeworks now. All right. Then we'll go to the primary topic in here. That is the area of concerns between India-China relations. This is going to be very important because there are major irritants that bother relationship between India and China. Then we'll also talk about what are the geopolitical strategies. And this is going to be something different that we have not encountered so far. We'll talk about the geopolitical strategies that China uses. So we'll talk about string of pearls. We'll talk about palm and five finger policy. These are going to be certain strategies, geopolitical strategies that China employs. Then we'll talk about how India is coping up with it. What are India's countermeasures with regards to Chinese dominance? We'll talk about this. And then finally, we'll talk about how do we see it from here? What can be the way forward? This topic would be relevant forever. This is one topic that would be relevant for next 5 mains. Reason being pretty simple. The dominance is not going anywhere. And the clashes are also not going to be solved anytime sooner. So maybe Maldives issue flares up, goes down, it's fine. But this particular topic would be important for next 5 years. And I am hoping that you don't want to write so many mains anyway. So you would want to prepare this topic very, very nicely. Focus karna, key baatein samajhna, and you will be able to write a good answer. So this is how we will be going about historical background, fact sheet, areas of concern, China's geopolitical strategy, India's response, and then we'll be talking about the way forward. All right, let us first talk about areas of concern. Whenever you have a neighboring nation, the very obvious area of concern is border dispute. And specifically, if it is a country that sees you as your competitor, there would definitely be certain areas of concern. You talk about any country, we would have certain border disputes with regards to them if they are sharing territory with us. The reasons are pretty simple. We have a colonial legacy. And I have time and again discussed it with you that the border demarcation was not done on ground. It was done on papers. And that is why the borders seem to be so confusing at so many places. Also, try and understand, every country will try to occupy strategic positions. They would always want the strategic positions to be in their favor. So no country will agree to cede land to another country on the pretext of having good relations. And specifically, if it is China, then you don't expect them to kind of give away their territories. Now, also understand this. It is said that if a country has to become powerful, it has to ensure that it isolates itself from the rest of the world. Understand this. America, for the longest time, was cut off from the rest of the world, and there was a huge development progress that was going on in there. Even if I talk about Britain, it's an island nation in itself. So if you look at its entire geographical features, it is kind of cut off from the entire Europe. And that is why you see whatever was happening in Europe was not directly impacting UK. And that is why for a very long period of time, wo apna dheere-dheere industrial revolution kar rahe the, and they were growing. But this luxury is not with China. Because if you look at geography of China, you will see there is Russia. You will see there is a huge Asian border that they share. So with China, they don't really have the luxury to cut off themselves from the rest of the world and establish their dominance. So unhone kya idea lagaya? Yaar, we can't cut ourselves off. So let us try and expand our horizon in this area itself. So they started securing themselves. Think about it. In the first place, India actually never had a border with China. It was actually what? Tibet. But what China did was it ensured that Tibet becomes a part of China. What is this? This is the idea of controlling the territory. This is the idea of ensuring their dominance in the region. So this was their way of consolidating dominance in this entire region, because ambition, देखो, ambition वही है जो UK का था, ambition वही है जो USA का था. So common ambition, but different strategy. And that is why when I'll be telling you about the geopolitical strategy, the entire game is to consolidate its presence in this entire region. That is the entire game of the geopolitics that China runs on. ये बात ध्यान में रखना, because then you will be able to understand why China comes up with something like palm and five finger. Why does it talk about the salami slicing strategy? Because it wants to ensure कि यार हमारे जो claws है ना, वो इस पूरे area पे इस तरह से जमे रहे that nobody else is able to come and counter us, our presence in this area. So let us look at some of the disputes that are quite important here and that you would want to remember. Now, I'll divide it into three sectors. The disputes, I'll divide it into three sectors because these are the primary borders that we share. One, I like to call it, for the sake of convenience, Western sector. Particularly, I'm talking about Ladakh. Then I'll call the middle sector, which would comprise Indian states of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. And this is the most dangerous proposition, that is the eastern sector, which is Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. This is where we need to be very, very careful, because remember, this is about India's northeast, which already faces a lot of problem with regards to assimilation in the Indian territory. Try and understand what I'm saying here. Now, when I talk about western sector, what is the area that I'm talking about? I'm talking about the Ladakh region. The problem was, this was a line that was proposed by the British, which is called the Johnson Line. Now, have you heard of this place? Have you heard of this place? Effectively, China controls this area. Effectively controls meaning the present presence is that of China. However, according to India, this is a part of now Ladakh. So the effective position is it belongs to China due to its positioning. But India claims that this area should go into Ladakh and therefore is an integral part of India. So ho gaya problem. This is one big problem. Now, China says that we don't agree to this Johnson Line. This Johnson Line was proposed by British, and according to it, it should be part of the princely state Jammu and Kashmir and now the state of, now the place of Ladakh. So they say we don't agree to it. They say we rather believe that McDonald Line is a better line. And this, according to this line, the control should go to China. However, what will be our official position? We'll always say that this area belongs to India. Effective positioning China के पास है, हम उसको claim करते हैं, तो हो गया dispute. Now look at the strategic presence of this area. Think about it. The way this area is present, and I'll also show you the map in here. Whoever is placed in this area gains a strategic advantage over the other. So if you're sitting on somebody's head, it's almost like you're sitting on somebody's head. Then you can have a presence in that entire region very easily. Precisely, this is the reason India also wants to be a part of this or would want to control this area, because they know if there is Chinese presence in this area, it would be pretty easy for them to kind of control the regions ahead. So we are very careful in here. These disputes are not very significant in present context. These are just for border demarcation purposes, chote-mote disputes, so we don't really need to sweat in here. This is our major problem. Because for them, Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim are part of their 5 fingers. And that is why China has been pressing. I hope you have heard of they issuing stapled visas. So there was an entire debate in Indian athletes when they went to China. They rejected that why should you be having visas? You don't need visas to be in here. Because for them, this territory belongs to China. So they said, oh, we'll issue you stapled visas, which primarily mean that they were not accepting Indian citizenship of these people living in Arunachal Pradesh, because according to them, the area belongs to China. Are you getting what I'm trying to say? So this gets very, very complicated for us. So China thinks that this McMahon Line is illegal, and therefore it says, now the problem was, try and understand, this entire treaty between India and Tibet was signed by the representatives of Tibet. China says, what authority did Tibet get to sign this convention? How could they decide what would be the border between India and China? So we disregard this line that has been decided by India and the representatives of Tibet. We don't agree to this, because for us, how can Tibet representatives decide that this would be the demarcated boundary between India and China? So my point here is we are very, very careful about Arunachal Pradesh and Sikkim. The reason being, we know that if this area gets complicated, it would be very, very difficult for India to kind of control this spillover effect. Because imagine if it starts from Arunachal Pradesh, it can actually spill over to so many regions of Northeast that are already fighting, working, organizing, or in a way also the presence of insurgent groups, which are kind of wanting separation from the territory. And that can be pretty dangerous for India. My question to you, On three fronts, very strategically, China wants to establish its presence. Do you think this is by chance, or do you think there is a strategy behind occupying these three key positions that China wants to place its hand over? और कहीं भी कर सकते थे. Why Arunachal Pradesh? Why Sikkim? Why this area? Any guesses?